I've had a couple of inquiries from fellow saltwater fly fishers on how to tie in the feathers in the tail of a deceiver, or in this case a clouser deceiver or a half and half, to stop them from fouling. And there's a couple of things I'd like to demonstrate here. The first is your feather selection, and I've got a bunch of, let's tie that off, a bunch of nice white saddle hackles here, some beauties, and you'll see a considerable difference between some of the feathers. So these three, for example, this one here is very limp. This one has a fair proportion of stiff feather to it, and this one is somewhere in between. And I'll mix these around. I'll get them all much the same length, but I'll put the really limp mobile feathers on the inside of the three. This is that long thin one there is going to be on the inside. I'll turn that over. So there they are there. So that the thin soft one is on the inside, and then there's two slightly stiffer ones on the outside. Now I'll remove the fluff from the base, tie that in. I leave the stems on. I'll show you why in a sec. So there's those three feathers tied in. Now I'll get three more feathers, looking for a similar makeup to the other side. One. Oh, that's a beauty. That's a really beautiful saddle hackle. Look at that. That's a ripper. Put that in the middle. Then maybe a skinny one. I try and match these according to what was on the other side. So there's my long, soft, skinny one. There's that absolute beauty in the middle. And then the slightly stiffer one on the outside. Get the lengths correct. Peel the fluff off again. Peel the marabou off. Tie them in. A few wraps. Now, the reason I leave those stubs on is that I can now pull those feathers back underneath the bindings, tighten that binding right up and set them in place, like so. Cut the stubs off now. So that's the first thing, match your feathers and think about where you're going to put them. Put the really soft, limp ones on the inside. They're the ones that are most likely to foul. So what do I mean by fouling? So this is what fouling is. When you cast, and one of these feathers will go around the bend of the hook like that. That's just, as a fly, that's just never going to work. And what happens, that feather becomes bent, out of shape, and it keeps doing it. If you've got a good fly and that one feather keeps doing it, just pull the feather out. Now, binding back down over the wide part here, then I'm going to take a wrap under, over, under, over, under, over, at least half a dozen times to really cock those feathers so they're very well bound in at the base here. Then I'm going to add my flash. This is going to be this fly, I'm not going to finish this, but it's going to be a half and half clouser. So it's going to be fish deep. So I want to put a fair bit of flash in it, and I just sort of stagger the ends of the flash like so. Get that back in behind the thread. Set it down either side like so. Now, if I wanted to put a grizzly hackle in now, or a coloured hackle, for example, I might tie a yellow hackle in on the outside. That would go on the other side. I would add that now. So I've done my base core of 6 white feathers, then I can add colour to the outside. Now, at this stage, I could add some hard as nails to the base of the feathers here, only about that far. Or some super glue, I like Loctite. Or some Solarez Flex, like so. Just add it to this, about that much of the feathers, just to create a little bit of stiffening around the base there. You want to trim some of that fluff off, so see that extra little bits of fluff off. So I could do that, but also what I can do would be to add a wrap of some brush. This is some white EP Foxy brush, wonderful stuff. Tie that in, just 3 or 4 wraps there, so it creates a collar over the base of the feathers here. Helps hold them in place. But what I'm actually going to do on this fly, I'm going to use a collar of bucktail. Now I'm going to take this from the butt end. This tail's had a lot of use, but there's still a lot of usable hair down the butt end here. I'm going to take a decent clump of it off because I'm going to clear off the excess. I'm only going to use that much of it. If I tie it in here, this is going to flare right out, and I don't want that. But if I tie that about halfway up, and I'm setting this just not too much, look, about a shank length over the hook shank length over the feather. Just put it in like that, bring in your left hand, push down, and push the feathers down, the hair, the bucktail down around the feathers. Bind that in. Now because I'm just using the tips, it won't flare out, which is what we don't want. Like so, trim that off. Some loose wraps as we come up here. So I've got the tight wraps to bind it in here. And then just some loose wraps here to hold it in place. You can see now how those feathers are holding, the bucktail is now holding the feathers in place, forming a collar around it. And that's a few different ways of avoiding the feathers in the tail of a deceiver or a half and half from fouling around the hook. That's what I do.